Everybody saw the final score, 90-82. Indiana Fever over the Golden State Valkyries. Clean, comfortable, move on. Except that final score is maybe the least interesting thing to come out of 40 minutes of basketball that was physical, emotionally charged, officiated controversially, and ultimately decided by a performance so dominant that the people paid to cover this league were calling it out loud in real time on live television. And if you think this was just another regular season win, you haven't been paying attention to what is actually happening with this franchise, this player, and this league right now. Because something shifted in this game, something that goes way beyond a box score. And by the time we're done breaking this down, you're going to understand exactly why. Let's start with the only place an honest breakdown can start. 22 points, 9 assists, 7 of 15 from the field. 4 of 5 from the free throw line, 3-point percentage hovering near 50%. All of that in 32 minutes of basketball. And if you just read those numbers off a page without watching the actual game, you would already be impressed. But watching the actual game is where the real story lives, because the numbers only tell you what happened. They don't tell you how it happened, or what it cost, or what it communicated about where Caitlin Clark's head is at right now. The logo threes were falling, not the comfortable wide-open kind that rack up percentages in garbage time, the contested ones, the ones where a defender is closing out and Clark is already in her release before they get there. The driving game was active, creative, and finishing through contact. The facilitation was running at a level that generated 9 assists and very nearly produced a full double-double before the final buzzer. And when the game got physical, when opposing players decided to test whether she would back down from contact, the answer was emphatic and immediate. She did not retreat from a single moment. She stood her ground, responded directly, and then went right back to making plays. There was a heated physical confrontation with Janelle Sloan that required officials to step in and restore order. Now here's the thing about that confrontation. Most analysts are going to gloss over it or frame it as a footnote. They're going to drop it into a sentence and move on because it feels uncomfortable to sit with. But that confrontation tells you more about where Clark's competitive mindset exists right now than any single statistic in the box score. This is not a player who is managing the moment. This is not a player who is trying to survive a difficult stretch of the season without making waves. This is a player who has decided, consciously or not, that this season is going to be answered through performance and through competitive fire, every single time. The broadcasters covering this game didn't wait for the final buzzer to form their opinion. They said it live, on air, during the game itself. Instant MVP candidate. Not a future projection, not a developing narrative that might take shape over the next few weeks. An immediate assessment made in real time by professional voices watching the performance unfold in front of them. When broadcast professionals use that specific language during a live game, it isn't a marketing decision. It's an honest reaction to something crossing a threshold that demands that specific characterization. And that threshold was crossed in this game. Here's what makes this performance genuinely remarkable, and I mean that word precisely, not casually. This season has not been kind to Caitlin Clark off the court. The coaching controversies have been documented extensively, the confrontations with staff captured on camera, the benching decisions in critical game situations that drew sustained and furious public criticism from fans, analysts, and people inside the league. A mysterious injury absence that triggered a formal league investigation, a disclosure scandal that generated its own separate wave of controversy, the lowest attended game of her entire professional era. All of that has been swirling around this franchise while she has been taking the court every night. Now think about what adversity at that level does to most professional athletes. Think about what that volume of off-court turbulence, that level of organizational dysfunction, that degree of public scrutiny does to a player's competitive output. The historical pattern across professional sports at every level is that performance diminishes under that kind of pressure. Players retreat, they protect themselves emotionally, they become cautious and conservative on the court because they're spending energy managing everything happening around them. That is the normal human response to an abnormal professional environment.
Clark is showing the opposite response. The adversity is not reducing her output, it is sharpening it. The fire that drove the Sloan confrontation, the fire that put up logo threes against active defenders in live competitive situations, the fire that generated 9 assists and nearly a double-double in 32 minutes against a professional defense, that fire is being fed by everything this season has thrown at her. She is not suppressing her competitive identity to survive this season. She is expressing it more fully and more directly than at any previous point in her professional career. And that is either the most impressive thing happening in women's basketball right now, or it is the most impressive thing happening in professional basketball at any level. Take your pick. Let's put some permanent context around what is being witnessed here, because permanent context is exactly what this moment deserves. Through 57 career games, Caitlin Clark has accumulated more points than any player in WNBA history had produced at the same career milestone, more assists than any player through 57 games, more three-pointers made than any player through that same career sample. We are not talking about obscure statistical categories that require specialized knowledge to appreciate. We are talking about scoring, playmaking, and perimeter shooting, the 3 foundational pillars of basketball production, and Clark leads all of them at the 57-game mark in the history of a professional league that has been running for decades. The records she is breaking were set by some of the greatest players this sport has ever produced, players who built careers that defined what excellence in women's professional basketball looks like. And Clark is surpassing those marks while simultaneously navigating one of the most organizationally chaotic professional environments any franchise cornerstone has ever been asked to perform within. Both of those things are true at exactly the same time. The historical dominance and the organizational turbulence are not separate stories happening in parallel. They are the same story. And the fact that one is not canceling out the other is what makes this season genuinely unprecedented in the history of women's professional basketball. Every game adds another chapter to a record book that keeps getting rewritten. The game against the Valkyries was another chapter, and when this season is fully concluded and the full body of work is laid out for evaluation, the context in which these records were broken is going to be part of the story. Because breaking records is one thing, breaking them while everything around you is on fire is something else entirely. Caitlin Clark was the story of this game, but Aaliyah Boston was the reason the story ended the way it did. And that distinction matters because it reflects something important about how this Indiana Fever team actually wins basketball games when it is functioning correctly. 8 of 15 from the field, 16 rebounds, 16. That is not a number that happens by accident. That is not a number that reflects a favorable matchup or a soft defensive environment. 16 rebounds across 40 minutes of competitive professional basketball against a team that came into this game with the demonstrated ability to extend possessions and generate second-chance opportunities that could neutralize Indiana's offensive advantages. The Valkyries had shown they could disrupt opponents through offensive rebounding. Boston answered that specific threat comprehensively and then continued answering it every single time it came up across 40 minutes. Indiana finished this game with 24 defensive rebounds. Think about what that number represents. 24 times the Fever secured possession after a missed Golden State shot. 24 times a potential second-chance offensive opportunity was eliminated before it could develop into points. A significant portion of that number flows directly from Boston's positioning, her timing, and her competitive commitment to doing the interior work that does not generate highlight moments, but absolutely determines game outcomes. The 16-rebound performance was not incidental to the 90-82 result. It was foundational to it. When Boston is engaged and contributing at this level, the interior dimension of Indiana's game looks categorically different from than it does when she is a secondary presence. The interior anchor she creates the defensive structure that allows Clark's offensive production to actually translate into wins, rather than just impressive individual statistics on a losing team. Boston was the backbone of this victory, and the story of this game cannot be told honestly without putting her exactly where she belongs in it. Professional basketball games are not won by two players alone, regardless of how dominant those two players might be. The rest of Indiana's rotation needed to contribute, and in this game, the contributions were real and they were meaningful.
Lexi Hall showed up at key moments with three-point production from a complementary position when Indiana needed perimeter scoring most. The ability to hit important shots in live competitive situations, not in garbage time, not in comfortable offensive possessions, but when the game is contested and the outcome is genuinely uncertain, is the specific skill that separates role players who take up space in a lineup from role players who actually extend a team's offensive ceiling. Hall delivered that specific skill in this game. Sophie Cunningham added 11 points on quality three-point shooting, continuing the reliable perimeter contribution that has made her one of the more consistent producers in this lineup across the full length of this season. Her shot was on, and that consistency from a complementary piece gave Indiana's offense enough spacing and enough alternative scoring threats to prevent Golden State from committing fully to stopping Clark and Boston. Kelsey Mitchell added to the collective offensive output, and the rotation as a whole produced enough scoring across enough different sources to secure the margin Indiana needed. The supporting cast performed in this game. That is the straightforward truth. And when it performs at this level alongside Clark and Boston, the ceiling of what this team can produce becomes very clear. Now we get to the part of this game that deserves direct and uncomfortable attention, because burying it under the celebration of a victory would be exactly the kind of comfortable dishonesty that leads to teams being blindsided by problems they refuse to look at clearly. 19 turnovers. Indiana committed 19 turnovers and won this game by 8 points. Sit with that for a moment. 19 separate possessions converted into scoring opportunities for the opposing team. 19 moments where ball security failed at a level that should have been punished severely and decisively. The reason it was not punished severely and decisively in this game is because the Golden State Valkyries were not sharp enough offensively to make Indiana pay for every single one of those mistakes. They missed layups, legitimate scoring opportunities, drives into the paint that produced favorable angles, close-range attempts that should fall at predictable professional rates. They missed them at a frequency that kept this game closer from Indiana's perspective than the turnover total should have ever allowed. And here is the honest and necessary follow-up to that observation. The margin for that kind of performance to produce the same survivable outcome does not exist against better teams. Teams with sharp offensive execution, teams that convert their open looks and their close-range attempts at professional rates, do not let 19 turnovers survive into a comfortable victory. They make 19 turnovers an insurmountable deficit. They punish every single one, and the cumulative effect becomes devastating and irreversible before halftime. Indiana got away with it against Golden State because Golden State helped them get away with it. The next opponent may not be so cooperative. The coaching staff needs to find sustainable solutions to the ball security problem before the schedule produces a matchup that makes the true cost of those turnovers fully and painfully undeniable. There is a dimension of this game that deserves more than a passing mention and consistently receives less honest engagement than it warrants. The officiating in this game was a substantive factor in how the contest played out, not a marginal factor, not a background noise issue, a substantive one. A flagrant foul was assessed in the later stages of this game with approximately 1 minute and change remaining on the clock. The timing of that call, the competitive situation it interrupted, the downstream effects it produced on the closing minutes of a game that was still being actively determined, generated real and visible frustration from players, coaches, and observers.
And the consistency of the officiating standard applied across the full 40 minutes went beyond any single call. There were moments throughout this game where the rules appeared to be applied unevenly in ways that shaped possession outcomes and influenced the flow of competitive momentum. Indiana won this game regardless of those concerns. That is the important clarification. The result was not determined by officiating decisions alone, but the pattern of officiating standards applied in games involving this franchise and this player is not a new complaint invented for this specific game. It is a documented, recurring, observable issue that has generated ongoing conversation for multiple seasons, and the league needs to address it with considerably more urgency and transparency than has been demonstrated to this point. Amid all the noise surrounding this game, there is one coaching dimension that deserves specific and direct acknowledgement because it contrasts meaningfully with the decisions that have generated the most sustained controversy across this entire season.
Stephanie White did not pull Clark from the floor during the decisive competitive stretches of this game. In a game that remained genuinely competitive into the final minutes, with the Valkyries refusing to go away and the outcome still being actively contested, Clark stayed on the floor. She remained present, active, and engaged across the periods when the competitive result was being determined. That stands in direct contrast to the patterns that have drawn the most intense and sustained public criticism across this season. The benching decisions in critical moments that left fans and analysts furious. The minute management calls that seemed to actively undermine Clark's ability to impact the outcomes that mattered most. Whether this game represents a genuine and lasting philosophical adjustment in how White manages Clark's minutes in high-stakes situations, or whether it reflected something more specific to the circumstances of this particular matchup, is a question that only subsequent games can fully answer. But in this game, the best player was trusted with the ball and the minutes in the moments that determined the outcome. And the result is exactly what Indiana looks like when that trust is extended completely and without hesitation. Here is where everything we've covered lands when you pull back far enough to see the full picture. Indiana needed this win. After everything that has surrounded this franchise across recent weeks, the organizational turbulence, the investigation questions to the attendance record low, the controversy that just keeps generating new chapters, the competitive landscape needed a result that provided both momentum and breathing room at the same time. The 90-82 final delivered that result. It delivered it through Boston's 16-rebound interior dominance and through Clark's 22 points, 9 assists, near 50% three-point shooting, logo threes against active defenders, and competitive fire that expressed itself in every physical confrontation and every direct confrontational response across 32 minutes. The MVP conversation surrounding Clark is no longer speculative. It is not a narrative being pushed by fan enthusiasm or commercial interest. It is grounded in a documented, accumulating body of work that the box score records game after game and that broadcast professionals are now verbalizing in real time on live television. More points, more assists, more three-pointers than any player in WNBA history through 57 career games. A near 50% three-point shooting performance in a physical, contested professional game against a defense that came in motivated and prepared. 9 assists and a competitive edge that expressed itself in ways that went well beyond the statistical record. The records keep falling, the MVP case keeps building, and the version of Caitlin Clark that this league witnessed against the Golden State Valkyries, standing her ground in every physical confrontation, hitting logo threes in contested situations, facilitating at an elite level, and competing with a fire that the adversity of this season has been feeding rather than extinguishing, is the version that makes everything else possible for this franchise and for this league to reach toward. The season continues, and based on what was witnessed in this game, wherever it goes next, it is going to be worth watching very, very closely.